Hi, Holly. How are you?
I'm good, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing well. So today we have this exciting topic of trying to find clarity, navigate the fog. Yeah, I just really feel like it's always an ongoing process of getting clearer and clearer over time. And especially I'm in this phase where I'm trying all this new business stuff, right? So
Sure.
it's kind of just throwing stuff out there and seeing what sticks. And the clarity might take a while to find. And it's cool to like with each step you kind of gain more and more. We're trying to look at, what are the things that hold people back, right? What keeps us from action? When you have a clear step to take, like that's logical, that has so much power behind it, right? There's just like
Yeah.
confidence that comes with that. But so getting to that place can often be a struggle. How do you see that
Yeah.
showing up for you right now, right? You're trying a lot of new things
Yeah.
and
Yes, there's lots of new things going on. For me, I think getting clear always has a good feeling associated with it. This is the direction we're going. This is what we need to do to accomplish the goal. So I think it's really important. It's not always the easiest to find, especially if it's trying a lot of new things and trying to find the one that sticks or the
Mhm.
one that helps you move forward the best. And we'll get there, I think, in the conversation today. But I think the bigger thing is when you have the clarity, it can sometimes bring up things that are really hard or things that are really uncomfortable. So you're really clear on what you need to go do or what the thing is, but it's uncomfortable to go do the thing that you're clear about.
Oh yeah, we're gonna go a little bit into why that is. Everything is. Yeah, there are the struggle phases, and then there's the breakthroughs, and here in permission to evolve, we're looking at aspects that okay, why am I stuck? Why am I having a hard time moving forward? Right. So a little bit of that might be I need to gain new knowledge and skills, but a big part of it is why am I stopping myself from taking those actions? Right. So that's our main focus is why are these things so tough? Like I know what I need to do, but there's a part of me that is fighting that. What's funny is like so many times there's all these like actions that, from externally, it's just like it's logically, oh, this person should do this in this situation. But, we all get in our own way and we all have these blind spots. That's the realm we're operating in here is, we can all be our own worst enemy. What could be super clear to somebody else could be absolute confusion for us, right? So that's what that is. It's like having truth tellers around you is an important piece of finding clarity. And kind of stemming off of we've already talked about self-sabotage and things of those nature. Sometimes it is so clear for other people to be like, yeah, like why are you doing that? Right. So the clarity piece, it's all of us have this default of like, I was raised a certain way. This is what I was taught to believe. And then we go through school and like it's like we kind of head into this like funnel. And the uncomfortable part could be when we start to question that, right? We could be like,
Sure.
well, why am I doing these things? And I kind of feel like I'm just supposed to be doing them, but that doesn't make me happy, right? That doesn't feel good to me. And so that's, kind of in the spiritual world is it's like this awakening process. They say like,
Sure.
oh, I start like questioning, right? And I think that's a big part of what this work is. It's whatever I've been doing, it, got me so far, but it doesn't really feel authentic anymore. And I almost need to go put myself in this like limbo, this like phase of I don't really know what's next, but I can't continue to move forward in the same way. In that place, we have all this upheaval of like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like all the things I thought I was, I'm not. They don't feel right to me. It's this ability to kind of sit in the discomfort. That's where we eventually find clarity. And, so generally there's so many things where we want to run from that discomfort. And so we just might jump back right on the same track of, okay, well, at least this is predictable. I know what this brings. And that's where this idea of settling starts to come in of like, I may have tried to switch tracks. It got uncomfortable. I didn't have the clarity. And now it just feels safer to go back on track. And now because I did that, I didn't meet the challenge, right? I didn't take the steps further. And so I don't trust myself to do that now. I don't trust myself to stick with it. And so that's the thing with everything we talk about here. It is this ability to get connected to this deeper calling of something more in tune with who you really are and your authenticity and who you came here to be. And sometimes that's very tough decisions. It could mean I need to take inventory of my life and make some drastic changes. And you know, family wise, that could mean gonna ruffle some feathers and create some problems rather than
Sure. Yeah.
rather than people pleasing. There's a lot of things that can come into view here. And by no means am I saying any of this is easy, but it may be the very thing we need to get back connected to ourselves and just kind of live a life that we're proud of. And I think that's such an important thing is at the end of the day, being able to look yourself in the mirror and be like, well, I'm doing everything in my power. This is messy. I don't really know, but I'd rather live this way to find these things out rather than just go through the motions every day.
Yeah, that all makes sense for sure. I think sometimes in the stage we're talking about where you're trying to find your way to clarity, I'm sure this is true for other people, not just me, but there can be fear in making the wrong decision that there's things that feel really clear in some ways, but can still get stuck in that. Is this the right decision? Is this what I really want? What if this doesn't work out long term? Those sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, we kind of need to face all those things. Those fears, we need to give them the voice and the floor. And if we don't acknowledge them, then, we are at this kind of tug of war with ourselves. And we do need to reconcile these things. And everything is kind of this tipping point. I never generally recommend, oh, I'm just going to change everything overnight and drastically do things. That doesn't usually end up well. It's kind of this progressive, I'm kind of working my way around different ideas, right? I'm taking small steps and I'm building momentum into maybe some sort of course correct or some shift, but I'm doing it in a way it's allowing me to find clarity as I go rather than, hey, I need to have all this figured out right now. Cause I think that's a overwhelming piece. Yeah. Cause there's very few things that are just absolutely like, hey, this is what I need to do. And it's clear cut. Generally that's as we start to go down the path where we're getting closer and closer to, yeah, this is exactly what I need to do. But it's a bit of a journey to get there. We could hit, it's like opportunity confusion, meaning there's too many things I'm considering, right?
Yeah.
And that can like shut me down, being, well, I might start off in this direction and then I might jump over here. And in the beginning, there might be some of that that's necessary to be like, well, I'm not super clear, so I'm just going to keep trying things until something gets enough interest or energy behind it where I can run with this. And so it's allowing us to have that of I don't have to have final decisions made. I can kind of try different things out and be okay with that. Eventually I'm going to want to have that ability to stick with something once I find it. There's also, the fear of making the wrong decision. Like you said, that is going to be, well, yeah, are there decisions I've made in my past that I've left in a bad place where I feel like it was a bad outcome? And, with this work, we're always shifting how we see those past failures is like, oh, that's actually, we needed to learn that, right? There's really no wrong decision. It's just we gain experience from everything. And depending on where we're at in the game, there just might not be a lot of good options with where we're at. And so it's giving ourselves that grace too of like, hey, I made a decision when all the options were bad. And so none of them are actually going to be good decisions, right? And so it's allowing ourselves to have that space of, well, okay, my situation's quite a bit better now. My options are generally better than they were. I might have been at a survival place in my life where it's just kind of there wasn't a good one to pick, but it's just the less bad one. And so when we're struggling, we tend to attach that to like these negative ideas of, oh, I don't trust myself, I make bad decisions. Well, if you didn't have anything good to work with, like that's probably going to always feel bad. So
Sure.
that's where we go back and re-examine a lot of these things. The other one could be, emotional fog of loyalties to family, or, I have a friend group that, you know, maybe I'm like feeling like I have to separate out. And so there's that conflict of like, yeah, I don't want to be alone, but I can't belong in the same system anymore. Right. Like there's kind of these different breaking off points because these things aren't clear cut decisions because if we're in a system where it's like, I get some of my needs met over here, but it's also leading to self-sacrifice. Yes, I need to leave. Well, it usually builds up to the point of like leaving gets stronger than staying. And so
That's
there's some
yeah.
variants. We've talked before, with kind of changing teams and stuff like that with you with that. So I think that's a good thing where it's something you were considering for a while. And then eventually you're just like, okay, now's the time to do this. Right.
Right.
That process takes a while to find that clarity. So we can see that progression for you. So if you want to kind of speak on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. We were working together when we started to hit a breaking point with a former team that I was a part of and needing to find a way to separate from that. And yeah, it's just as you talked about, right? Like over time, it became less and less tenable for me to stay in that environment and needing to find something that felt better for my own growth and the journey that I was on at the time. So all of that makes really good sense. But one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking through that, and maybe for the phase that I'm in today, is the external pressure that can kind of mess up the clarity having to do with it, you know, societal things or what's happening in the world. It creates another layer to the whole pathway forward, right? This sort of lack of stability in the broader world and how that comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It's like I always recommend, creating some sort of practice where, you get some time alone to find clarity each day. I think it should be a regular thing because there's so many of these things that can pull on us, right? Kind of group think is like one of them. So if I'm in a team setting or, belong to an organization or whatever it is, like there's like kind of a common thought process and that can be affecting my clarity. But yeah, societal norms and expectations, those are deeply ingrained in us where it's like most people operate a similar way. And those are kind of, it's kind of this predetermined framework that it just, like I said, these things are kind of funnels. And so you have to take that step back and question and get really connected to yourself and be, is this right for me? Right? Like how do I relate to this? Does this feel good to me? Does this feel off base? And taking that time to reset and get that center because it's so important because all these things like we can just easily get caught up in stuff. And I would say like drama based things, that energy just kind of spins where it can like pull us in. Feeding drama, worst case scenarios. So all these things, I'm in survival thinking or negative thinking, everything becomes all or none. And generally, any of our solutions for any problem is going to be in nuance. It's going to be very context based. This is what I need to do in this situation. This is how I need to adjust. And there's not going to be these like clear cut rules that apply. That is where we need to find these practices to get that center going, is because otherwise we may think that we believe something, but it could just been like, no, I've just heard this over and over again throughout my life. And so I'm kind of programmed. So I
Yeah.
feel pulled in a direction because that's the momentum of maybe the world, or, that's the way things are alleged, but we get to choose to create that space. And yeah, I might agree with these things, but these things don't feel right to me. And so we get more selective about how we're going to be, living and navigating our life, where anytime I do just get pulled into like a group, there's going to be a duality to that. There's going to be this mixed bag, right? And that's a little bit like what we're talking about with the team setting of these can be like community things can be very beneficial on a lot of levels, but then there could also be, well, yeah, if everybody has a similar mindset and I'm not in alignment with that, I could be self-sacrificing now, right? And so I have to figure out, what's the right balance for me, and that can be very confusing, especially if there's numbers behind like a certain thought process of I feel like I'm supposed to feel this way because that's safer, right? Because nobody really wants to stand alone, right? Like that's very difficult to do. And so you start to hear people have like, even in like the personal development world, right? There's a lot of people just lumped together and they all sound the same. And there's no independent thinking. It doesn't like carry much weight because they're just generalities. So we gotta get clear on, okay, what do I actually believe? And to have my own like distinct opinions about things, But that could mean I'm going to say this, like that might upset these types of people, right? There might be some backlash there and that kind of stuff. And so that's the journey you take when you go to like live authentically is, well, I have to be okay, like speaking my mind, you know, in all sorts of situations, and that might not be well received, right? So we may be bumping up against the societal norms, things like that. And so, yeah, that's like, kind of the therapy world, right? There's kind of been this like attention on, mental health, which is great. I think people are thinking a lot more about it. Then there's a lot of thinking around, oh, let's just try and create bubbles around people where everything's safe, rather than like teaching people to work through the challenges and the stress, right? And
Right.
so the bubble phase is necessary, but I would say, like many things we talk about, I feel like, hey, this is a phase, like you kind of need to create some separation and get clear on yourself, form a lot of boundaries, things like that. But we don't want to stay there because that's going to lead to a smaller and smaller life. Then it's just like, okay, now that I've created this separation, I want to do the work to, okay, these things that have been painful for me, how do I move through them? How do I overcome them? How do I get stronger from them? How do I gain wisdom from them? And then that's when my life expands and opens up, where I trust myself in any situation rather than I need this perfect environment in order to function properly. So it's this mixture of like, yes, sometimes like we need that, but do we need that all the time? No. So it's finding the nuance in everything, and so that's the pretty big enemy of clarity is I thought this is what I'm supposed to do. I did it, and then it still doesn't feel right. And then it is, oh, now I don't know what my path forward is because I thought I did what I was supposed to do. So everything's an evolution where you needed it at that stage, but then your next step is going to be these new set of steps, right? It's going to be we moved in that direction. Now we have to get back to center, or we have to go a little bit actually back this way. And that's being fluid with things because that's the nature of it. Everything has a flow, and we got to find the flow to it. So there's so much of this all or none thinking of like, if I just do this, then yeah, that's going to get me to a point where I'm going to hit another wall, and then I'm going to have to work through that, and I'm going to find clarity on the other side of that. It's a dynamic, fluid way of being rather than, oh, like I'm this and then like I just kind of build in this lane now. It's no, it's gonna be a back and forth. Like that's if we're evolving, if we're changing, if we're growing and we're getting stronger, you're probably not going to be operating on the same idea forevermore. Like that might suit you then, but then there's going to be a point where that's no longer working, and then we need to readjust.
So that's in the line of being flexible. I think about that where maybe you don't continue to believe, to your point, right? You don't continue to believe the same things forever. But I'm also wondering if you have tips or thoughts around not reverting, because as you come up against these things and it's uncomfortable, or I'm really clear I want to take this XYZ step and maybe there's a challenge that comes into place, and it would feel better to just revert and be like, "Oh, I changed my mind. I'm actually not going to do this. I'm going to go back." Like how can you push through that, which is this goes back to self-sabotage, what we've talked about, but what's the tips for pushing through that when you know you're clear and you come up against that spot and you need to keep going?
Well, I would say one, give yourself permission to revert because you're going to. Everybody does. These things aren't like a straight line. Yeah, like we want to have this overall commitment that, hey, I'm going to continue to work through this, and it's not going to happen on the timeline I want it to, but I need to be telling myself I'm actively working at it. And so there are going to be some challenges that are more stressful that do plug you into old practice habits, and everything literally in our nervous system, it's got its own wiring where it's like if something has been a dominant part of us for so long, there's going to be many, many different layers to totally detach from that way of being. So I'm going to run up against things that may trigger me or pull me back, and I'm gonna get pulled back, right? Because my energy attached to my past is stronger at that point, and so I'm gonna revert, and I just want to make it a lesser version of what it was before. Okay. And so if you don't beat up on yourself, you don't shame it, you just recognize, oh, yeah, I found myself back here, but I am committed to making this change. And so that's where self-compassion comes in. When I do slide back, of course this happened. I lived one way for 30 years or whatever, and now I'm trying to change it. And so that's got a lot of energy behind it. It's very practiced. So it's very efficient to do that. And so when we create awareness, all we're doing is being like, oh, okay, I backslid, and we're going to be upset with ourselves, but we learn from that. This is good that I'm upset, because like I know that that's a signal that I want to make this change and I want to take these steps. So I need to, once I'm upset and disappointed, I want to go through that and get to the place of self-compassion of, yeah, like change can be difficult, and it's because I've been doing one thing so long that, and it's very reinforced by society and family systems and like all these things. Like, why wouldn't I backslide once in a while? So as we go through those emotions, it's like, okay, I want to get back on track. Like once I get over that kind of grieving process or the frustration, it's gonna be, all right, I need to recenter and I need to get back at it. Okay. And then that's where, I think we kind of need this like wholesale change. Is nothing's all or none. It's gonna be different variances of it. And so there's gonna be things that are gonna be more difficult to change. And that's where we do need to stick with it, because those are generally our biggest opportunities for growth. But it is knowing that if I'm struggling here, I am going to show up in the old way once in a while. I just want it to be a lesser version. I want it to have less power over me. I want it to be in a place where it's just like, I know I can get back at it. I'm not stuck here forever. So it's kind of a little bit of a back and forth. And so it's this flexibility to be in tune with ourselves, to be, well, I'm just creating deeper awarenesses around why this situation is difficult for me. And as I learn those lessons and I heal those, and so healing is an understanding. So when I understand why I am a certain way, that already starts to take energy out of it, because, oh, I'm no longer like, I understand why this came to be and I'm not fighting it anymore. It's just like I'm choosing something new. We're never fighting, because if I'm fighting, it's just going to keep it in play. So I recognize it, and now I want to shift out of it. Right. So I'm choosing a new path. And as I choose that new path, I'm going to continually be confronted with these old things. I'm going to have to face them over and over again until they've outgrown their usefulness for me, meaning I know this is not good for me, or I know I have no desire in continuing this pattern. Okay. And we'll see this a lot with family patterns, where we have like generational traumas, or these like painful ways, the dysfunctional ways the family operates. You're just like, yeah, I just can't do this anymore. I know this isn't healthy for me.
So, as you're talking through that, a lot of that sounds really good and really healthy to work through. Why would someone why would someone avoid looking for the clarity?
Well, they're because they're not going to like what they see. It's always, I mean, the truth is, no matter what's happened, if we want to change something, we do have to take responsibility for it all. And that just means it's the whole journey of like, whatever I've internalized about information, about situations, that information's mine to own and mine to reprogram if I want. Right. And when I say I don't like what I see, this is a common one I see with people is like, well, you know, they come to me in session and they're upset about somebody else, right? But it's how somebody else is behaving. But generally that's like a mirror. It's a reflection of like, well, yeah, you used to operate that way. Right. So there's the shame around that of like, I'm like, I don't like, yeah, maybe I've done things I'm not proud of. Maybe at that point in time, like I thought I was doing the right thing, but now that I've grown past it, like I see that it did create a lot of problems and it maybe caused other people pain or things of that nature. That's a difficult piece, is like when we're confronted with an old version of ourselves that we're seeing in another person, and we have shame built up around that. And these are all subconscious, like subtle recognitions. But when I have that shame, like I can't move past that until I forgive myself. That person's always going to bother me until like I get to the place of like realization that, oh, I used to operate that way. It's kind of crazy like when we see it, but it's there every time of like, oh yeah, I'm just not fully owning that I have that within me, and I'm shaming that piece. And so now it's keeping me stuck. That might be the very thing that's going to allow me to move forward, is like forgiving myself. Because if I have an aspect that I'm shaming that I'm not proud of, that's not going to allow me to move forward, because I can't be vulnerable enough to drop that. So I need to I need to get to that place where I can see that and surrender to it and move through it and let it go. And that's what's going to give me the clarity to what my next step is. Okay. This is high level, but there's these aspects of ourselves that, we're not proud of, and we all have them. Okay. And that's the thing with this work is there's no judgment. Like I said, when you're in survival, when you're in these places where there's no good options, you do what you have to do, or you do what you feel like you think is best. And those are generally things that aren't very good. So those are the things that we all lock away and we pretend like, hey, like, I've never done anything like that. Or I've never, that keeping it locked away is actually what prevents us from finding the clarity, because we need to open up that vulnerability, that self-compassion to heal it. And now I can trust myself to move forward because I need that piece back. I need it opened up. I need that piece to find my next step, because I'm limiting myself in some way because of something. There can be a lot of the shame is like a very low dense energy, and it's very difficult to move past it. And so those are generally the things is we don't trust ourselves to move forward. And so every time I move forward, it creates confusion in my mind because I haven't healed that piece. And so it's just this tug of war to be like, no, we have to keep this stuff down. I can't show this to anybody. Right. And so
Yeah.
like when we do healing work, that's what we're doing. We're shining a light on this stuff of like, okay, you were doing the best you could, everybody is, but there's just so many things where there's not good options or we don't know better yet. So once you know better, like you obviously want to act from that place of I know not to do that anymore. Okay. But if you acted from that place at one point, like you didn't really know better yet. So shame is the signal to be like, hey, you need to grow here. And if we keep it in the shame place, we don't learn that lesson. But if I open it up and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I thought this was going to create this solution and that's why I did this. And now I see that that wasn't the right strategy. This is a better way. And our filter with this work is always we're not hurting other people. Okay. It's that's the standard of I can maneuver life without being destructive to myself or other people. And so that's the goal we're always trying to get to, but we all do these subtle things that are destructive to ourselves, other people, relationships. It's getting to this place of acknowledging that's generally why we don't find clarity is we don't trust ourselves around those things. And so we can't get that next step.
So if we're trying if we're trying to overcome all of that and we want to get on the path where we actually are becoming clear, we are having that clarity, what would be the things that you would recommend there that maybe are tangible things that people could start doing today?
I think the number one thing anybody can do is create some space in their life where it's just them, where, whether it's journal, reflection, anything, being and pulling up the negative emotions you feel throughout the day to be, why was I reactive to this? Why, we start to question what's going on. Yeah, why am I so angry? Why am I so upset? What's at the bottom of these things? Because that understanding is what allows us to soften all this stuff. And that's really what's going to help us find clarity and change is getting clear on like these things are automatic for us that we don't quite understand why we do them. So much of this is reinforced by our upbringing and society and all those expectations where it's second nature. And so, this is a common thing, for athletes, you're trying to like optimize how your body moves, right? So you need to like interrupt patterns. You need to be, I'm used to moving this way. I have to be able to see how that's the wrong way to move. I could be moving better. I could be moving more efficiently. So that takes conscious work of I need to see how it's done differently. And so that's where we have role models or people we look up to be like, hey, this person, I want to develop this skill or this character trait. What journey do I need to take to do that? Right. So I need to be able to see a version of it. And then I need to create some space to reflect on myself, like my habits, behaviors, my beliefs around it. And then start to work on being more conscious of like, I'm going to catch myself next time I do this, that this is in direct opposition with what I want. So I'm going to start to catch myself. I'm going to interrupt the patterns that are practiced and I'm going to think deeper about it, being like, yeah, why do I do this every time X happens? And these could be destructive things like, oh, when I When I get angry, then, I start drinking or something like that, right? It's like, and then that takes me way off track from what I want, right? We all have
Yes.
these or if I'm super stressed at work, then I come home and I just like binge eat, right? Or I need sweets or something like that, right? So it's like the emotional eating, right? I start to recognize when this happens, then I go to this to make me feel better. And then that makes me feel worse and worse about myself, which is going to pull me off track. And that's going to hinder clarity because I don't trust myself to stay on track. Pattern interrupts. It's like creating a space to reflect and to be like, well, getting to this self-compassion place of this is all I've ever known. This is what I was taught. Like, why would I know any different? Like, we get to this place where we stop shaming ourselves so much because the shame is what prevents the growth. Okay. Because, like, I'm a bad person or I'm bad in general, or I don't deserve good things. So I keep shutting myself down because my self talk is in this place of being hypercritical and actually destructive. So shame is going to be destructive. We're suppressing an aspect of ourselves and we're locking it away and acting like it doesn't exist. Okay. And so that's going to hinder our clarity every time we move forward. And so it's slowing down, creating some space, looking at models, figuring out what paths they've taken. Those are like going to give us some good steps. And there's generally a well charted way. And there's our way is going to be a little bit different. There's going to be nuance. And we have to expect that, based on my past, there's going to be things that are coming up that I'm going to be in conflict with. And to stay on track and to continue to find clarity, each time I run up against a wall, I need to know that I'm going to have, heavy emotions come up. I'm going to have negative thinking come up. I'm going to have doubts that are going to tell me I can't do it or shouldn't do it or I'm not good enough to do it. So all those things need to be confronted. And that's difficult. That's difficult work. It's painful to to be like, well, yeah, like I'm actually sabotaging myself. I'm the one stopping myself. I'm the one. So many of these things feel like they're out of our control or that it's somebody else's fault. And childhood wise, a lot of these things we weren't in control of. Okay. So that's where like a lot of the tug of war happens is I don't feel like I've made a lot of these decisions in the first part of my life, but they just kind of happen. So it's difficult to take responsibility for those because of that scenario. But if we want to change them, it's like, okay, how can I move through this? How can I change how I'm seeing the situation? How can I start to forgive the people involved? Because the more I'm attached to it, the more I'm like fixated on, hey, you did these things to me, that pulls me off track too. I'm not going to find solutions in that place. Right. And then so it's always I can be right or I can get to where I want to go. And so that's a tough thing when we feel like things have been done to us, right? Because that's us being stuck and bound to the past. And we're going to want to move forward to find new clarity. And so me letting go of those things is what's actually going to open up my mind to see things differently.
Yes. I resemble that whole journey that you just went on there. So, as you were coming to the end of that, you were getting to the place of asking questions, and I think that's an important, thing to maybe touch on just a little bit more around the asking the right questions, because as the and we've talked about this previously a little bit, but as the inner critic comes up, it's easier to sort of let the "I'm terrible" voice override the questioning voice, the curious voice. So how do we kind of frame up in and get to those better questions?
Well, and it is giving us permission to feel whatever is coming up because I'm feeling this way where I'm beating up on myself, but then I also get caught in the game of, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Right. And so first step is like I give myself permission to feel that way. Hey, this is where I'm at. It's okay. I have to know that that's like the voice in my past. This is the voice that's going to shut me down. This is the voice that's I was shamed on some level by somebody else or me or combination of both probably. But generally like when we're little kids and we make a mistake, like let's say our parents are fighting or whatever, like we always make it about us. It's my fault that they're fighting, right? And so we have kind of this lower level thought process of like thinking everything's our fault, and that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. And so yeah, to get to this place of questioning and self-compassion and getting to deeper in the thought process, I have to be, well, okay, I'm here. I have to like I have to allow myself to feel this way fully. And then when I felt it on the other side of it, I get to this point of choice of I've moved through the feeling. I didn't suppress it or reject it. And now I'm at this place to recalibrate what direction do I want to move and what changes do I need to make to move there. And as I'm starting to align myself, I know that as I'm taking those steps, there are going to be more and more things that are going to come up. Okay. And that's the journey I take that's going to lead me back to myself. Okay. That's going to lead me back to each time that comes up. I feel the emotions, I process them, I let them go. And then I keep asking, is this still true for me? Is this in conflict with what I want? Why do I feel this way about myself? And we're always going to get windows into those things of like, if we sit with ourselves and we think about it, we'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm just telling myself that because my dad kept telling me that. These things get like hardwired into our system. We've talked about that previously too, where it's like that's not generally our voice. It's the voice of the people around us. And we just like absorb so much of it. And if it's a common thought process, said if that's all we heard from a bunch of people, that then that's really going to affect our point of view. And that's the thing with like, social media and news and all these things. It's like if you keep amplifying the same message to people, it is a very like powerful programming system where it's like I'm just thinking these things because it's just repeated to me over and over again. Like, do I really believe those things? That's that creating space, questioning. And the space is to get the clarity. The space is to create your little, hey, I'm not being influenced by other things right now. And that's where I'm going to start to sort through and get to this critical thinking phase of what works in my life and what doesn't. And so once I gain that idea, I'm taking this action, but that's like I'm trying to get over here and this action takes me over here. So that like these things aren't matching up. I want my actions to start to align in a better way. And I'm not going to fully know what that is. I'm probably going to know some general steps I can take, or I can watch some videos, or I can like ask somebody to help me that's like further along in that process. I can start to, because they can probably see what are good next steps are for me better than I can if I haven't done it before, right? So that's where we need to surrender the shame of learning. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I should ask for help. That's going to move us a lot faster than us trying to sort it out ourselves. And so that's, it is this ability. There's so much, I know like on my baseball journey, all the decisions I took where I was or this path I took where I was just like, it was very difficult to find clarity. I didn't know what was happening next, but the number one thing that allowed me to move forward over and over again was this ability to humble myself, be vulnerable and ask for help. Right. Because it's just like, I didn't know what I didn't know. I was trying the best I could. And that's the thing is like actions are kind of all over the board for a while until you get it honed in. And so it's like, you need people that can kind of like refine you along the way. And so that just, we need to realize whatever I'm doing isn't getting me to where I want to go. So I need to get centered, but then I also need to ask the bigger questions of who can help me get further along than I can myself. And that might speed up my path a lot. And from that place, it might be blatantly obvious that, yeah, like I don't know what I'm doing. And this person's a good guide. So they can give me steps that are going to move me along at a pace that's manageable for me, right? Where I might be wanting to take massive steps and then that's going to bury me and I'm going to jump back again because I tried to do too much and there's too many unknowns. And so my nervous system shuts down and gets overwhelmed where I can't get from here to here in one step. It's going to be a lot of steps along the way. But if I'm trying to take the big leap all at once, that's a good recipe for sabotage as well. I'm making it too big of a change. And now, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so now I'm lost and confused. Right. And so when I'm lost and confused, that's the furthest thing from clarity. So our clarity is generally going to be what's the next logical step. But we get to the next logical step once we address the piece that's blocking us from it, which is generally going to be sabotage from our past. It's going to be things that negative beliefs I carry about myself that are shutting me down from seeing the opportunity right in front of me. Once I clear that out, this is obvious what I need to do here. You don't need to go from, oh, let's say like the most you've ever made is $100,000, right? In a year. It's like, oh, I need to make 10 million this year. It's not, that's like too big of a jump. And yes, it can happen, whatever. But realistically, to get to that level, you need to develop all these skill sets along the way, right? You can get there, but it's probably going to be a different timeline. We don't go from that to that. We go from 100,000 to 200, right? Or 100 to 500 would be a bigger jump, right? So that's all you're trying to do is what's something that's connected enough where there's a pretty clear path to it. I am going to have to overcome things within me, but it's not going to be as much as me trying to get to the 10 million mark. That's too far off for me to even comprehend. It's just like you take things in doses that make sense for you. And the further along you get, like you can take bigger jumps because you've developed skill sets that can accelerate the process for you. You see a lot of this in business where, somebody like they might have had 10 startups and finally got one to click, right? And then from that point, so they had 9 failures. And then from that point, they figured out the recipe. So they just do it over and over again now, right? But all the learning from the first 9 that failed to be, oh, I get this now. And now there's a ton of confidence behind it and it's easier, right? So that's kind of
Yeah.
what you look for is working through the problems is what gets you the clarity. And once all the dots start to connect and you have a lot of clarity, now your impact goes through the roof because it's just you have your recipe.
Yeah, makes sense. This might be a question for another podcast. So I'll take it out if you don't want to go down this rabbit hole. But as we were talking, I was thinking about times where I made big leaps and there was relief behind it. And it wasn't that all the negative things didn't come along later, but I'm curious about what might cause that. I can go from 0 to 100 really quick, and when I make that commitment and that jump to the big thing, sometimes there's a moment, it's not long lasting, but a moment of relief associated with that. This might be a whole other podcast topic, so let me know.
Well, I, I think there is that the relief is, I think it's a bit of a recognition that, oh, I can do these things. We generally need some sort of early success to continue down the path, right? Of, we're given what we need every step of the way. So if I take the big leap and then I get a positive reinforcement behind that, that's almost what allows me to sustain the path of, oh, this got me going. And then, yeah, I got confronted with all the issues that the things I needed to refine, but it was kind of an early win is a clue that, hey, I'm on the right track here and there is potential here. And that gives us what we need to sustain ourselves to continue to move forward when all the tough stuff does hit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
They call this the Dunning-Kruger effect or whatever, where when somebody starts something, maybe they have like a talent or whatever. Early on, they have a bunch of success, but they think they're better than they are, right? I just started, I had some success. And I've seen this over and over again in my life where I'm like, oh, I thought I had it all figured out. And then the problems hit. And then you get to this place where you're just like, oh, you almost go too far the other way where you're like, oh, I don't know anything now. And I have to start at the bottom and build it all the way back up. And that's how you build that true confidence is being humbled over and over again. Is we kind of have too much ego in the beginning because we're getting all the success without even trying. We haven't built the skills yet though to sustain it. So that's the second phase. We're going to plummet. And that's by design because now it's like, if I stick with it, now I have to actually develop the skill sets to get back to success. But once I get it the second time, it's going to be sustainable. Yeah. So it's kind of that idea of like big steps and positive reinforcement. It gets me rolling. And then I hit the wall and then it's just like, okay, do I want to stick with this? Generally, the success is what allows us to be like, yeah, I can get back there. Right. Even if it takes a while, we all want things faster than they come. There is that battle of, I wish I didn't have to do this, or like, why couldn't it be as easy as it was? But no, once you learn all the skill sets, once again, that the impact amplifies from that place once you actually lay the foundation. And I can create predictable results now instead of, oh, I got lucky a few times.
Makes sense.
So, in general, clarity is just this kind of thing. It comes in waves. We have to wrestle with it. It's always this idea of like, how do I stay connected to something? I'm only going to be able to stay to things that are really meaningful to me, that I can operate from a clean place. We might stay stuck on a topic or idea in order to learn about our wound. Like that's a different one, like trying to prove myself. That's going to be not feeling good enough. So I might make that my motivation to drive forward, and eventually that's going to wear out because that's going to be built for me not being good enough. That's never going to make you feel good inside. It's always going to be nothing's ever good enough from that place. So so we have kind of different versions of clarity, but we're talking about the one that's like you connected yourself, you connected your purpose, not self-sacrificing, not people pleasing, not giving up all the things that matter to you. How do we get connected there and then sustain that path and continue down that road? It's going to be getting back to self-compassion, forgiving yourself, forgiving all people involved, really coming from this place of I'm doing this because I love it. I do this because I want to serve or help people. It's never going to be a kind of the surface level stuff generally. We deepen this path to, what's my purpose here? What did I come here to do? That clarity is that journey is going to be taking us into ourself where these challenges are going to surface that we have to overcome in order to get stronger and stronger within ourselves. And so that's kind of that how that's going to go. So that ability to remain connected to your calling and what matters most to you and be connected to this bigger picture of I want to serve, that's it's a tough path and it pretty much is every time, but it's also a very rewarding path. So that's always the challenge is like, do I want the surface level desires or do I want the deep meaningful ones that are just going to make me feel really fulfilled and content inside? So that's kind of the clarity we're talking about is moving towards that. And that is going to be facing and accepting the parts of ourselves that we've denied along the way.
So, as we wrap this thing up today, Brandon, what would you say are some signs and some things that you're gaining clarity and moving forward in the right direction?
Well, I would say it's really just this idea of setting up your life so that you get stronger and stronger within yourself so that you feel the confidence to overcome challenges. A lot of times what we think is clarity is just generally us like falling back into the normal path that everybody takes, right? And the clarity we're talking about here is this it's not really something that is just going to be the norm. It's going to be something you're creating along the way that makes you feel more empowered, more connected, more vibrant every step of the way because I'm taking this path that feels right to me. And that's generally going to be in conflict with the people around us that are maybe doing a lot of the normal things. And so it's this ability to work through the confusion. It's this ability to create that space. The grieving process involved with this, where our friends may shift, or our our career may shift, or what we thought was true for us for so long might not feel valid anymore. And so it's just this invitation to take a deeper path and really get back connected to what we really want. Because so many of these things have a momentum to them where we just kind of naturally get funneled into a pretty similar path. So it's this ability to separate out. So our biggest key is creating some practices where I can get clear on myself. I can start to ask deeper questions. I can start to really figure out a way to align my life that's going to have a better flow to it, but it's also going to be supportive of kind of more purposeful, fulfilling things rather than superficial, surface level things. Those things are all fleeting, and not that those things are wonderful. There's no judgment on it, but there is generally just more to life. It's a mixture of both that kind of creates the best of both worlds is what we're really looking for. That's generally a balanced perspective. So that's not really going to be taking the easy road or the easy way out or avoidance. It's going to be me taking a journey into these things that have been struggles and problems and really understanding them at a deep level and moving forward in a new way. It's a deprogramming, unlearning process, unwiring. We have many words for this, but I'm interrupting the things I've always done in exchange for me choosing something new.
Awesome. So good.
So we'll wrap up there with the Lightning Lab. We can continue to enroll in that. So this is a group coaching program I'm doing it's 2 sessions each month on it. I'm teaching on a topic, and then one session is going to be a breakthrough Q&A session. And then there's also weekly exercises, what we're talking about here, reflection exercises, asking deeper questions, And then there's also a community chat where we can all engage with each other. So this is going to kind of be an evergreen thing where each 3 months I'm going to be covering a new topic. So you can join at any time, and we'll throw you into the next group as it started. So we started this last week, and just working on authentic confidence and just really getting clear on establishing awareness, much like we're talking about here. Like, what do I want out of life? What's standing in the way of that? And how can I move forward in a new way that gets me back on track or gets me more connected to myself, and that's going to lead me down a road to bigger and better things.
Yeah, it's a great session. Great way to meet minded people and yeah, grow with a community. We'll make sure all the links to the Lightning Lab, connecting with Brandon if you're looking to go deeper one on one, and all the ways that you can find the podcast on socials. We'll make sure all those links are in the show notes.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We look forward to the next time. I'll see you later, Holly.
Talk to you later, Brandon.
Bye.